Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everybody. Welcome. If you're new here, welcome to the happy July 4th Independence Day Knights of Last Call stream. We're still set up in the the stream configuration I had the other day where we had a green screen up. So my green screen is still up. So if you caught we had a special Patreon screen or a special Patreon stream where we talked about Dragontide, and I was like messing around with. I was like, hey, I brought all this old stuff over from the studio, and one of them was this green screen that I never really got around to using, so we threw it up, and there we go. And I forgot that it was set up, and so when I turned on my OBS, there was no frame around me, and I was like, oh shit, I need to go get the green screen, put up a green screen. So, in any case, welcome. My name is Derek Melinda. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. This is a special holiday version. We're here at noon. For those of us in the United States, happy Independence Day. For those of you around the world, you're welcome. No, I'm just kidding. America, it's had its ups and its downs. Let's just say that. All right. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. And one of the things I've said I've wanted to do a number of times is to do some more EU friendly streams, or maybe wherever you are around the world. Sometimes I understand that our usual time of the evening, East Coast US, is pretty rough. So, if I can, get some extra, streams in there throughout the course of the month that are a little bit more friendly for other time zones, we'll do that. So, So, to be clear, this isn't going to be like one of our, direct topics that we cover a specific item. We do have a number of streams coming up where we're going to do a stream. We're going to do a history class stream on the wizard, a history class stream on the cleric, and we had a vote, which people didn't pay attention to because I said, hey, I don't want to really do anything too super complicated for this middle of the day stream. But there was a lot of votes for people who wanted to see me take a look at DC 20, which just finished their Kickstarter, over $2 million raised. And I mean, I'm not opposed to that. So, maybe we'll take a look at that as well. Trevco misses the bookcase. Huh? Is that better? There you go. It's still there, I promise. Anyways, yeah. So anyways, welcome everybody. I'm glad to have you here. Today is just going to be a Q&A. We're just going to kind of hang out. Some of you maybe don't usually get to participate in these live streams. You might catch all the VODs and all that other stuff. But it's not really normally a thing that you can do. So I'm excited to hear your questions. If you do have a question, go ahead and throw it in chat. We don't have any tip goals today or stream goals today. We're just gonna be hanging out for an hour or so. But if you want to throw a super chat or tip in there too, you're welcome to do so. It's always appreciated. But mostly this is just a holiday hangout with some of my favorite folks. So yeah, let's see who we got here. Solana slept for 10 hours and it was glorious. That's fantastic. Jerry Webster's excited to be here. Lame Mule says, yay, an EU-friendly stream. Happy to do it for you. Dr. Waits says, Washington has to be the greatest president. If not for him, we'd all be speaking English today. Very funny. Mike T, welcome. Glad to have you here. Leonard, hello. Jerry, hello to you again. Ken, Murica. That's right. Rule of Cool, green screen. No way. Yep, we do have the green screen. Confirmed. So, yeah, I think it's pretty cool that we're in this situation, getting to hang out with everybody. Happy 4th to you, Henrik. Thank you. Salutations from Poland. Great. Wow, look at that. See, we're already getting some new blood in here. We're so nice that we're even giving Europeans a chance. That's right. Well, it's still 4th of July. It's still a great date. I mean, you can hang out. A DC 21 deep dive. We're still kind of working on that one a little bit. Pepper is apparently very impressed. Kyle pulling up and down the green screen look cool. Yeah, I mean It's actually really easy. Especially OBS has a built-in what's called a chroma key, and the one that I actually have, this green screen that I have, is a Elgato green screen. It's actually really quite good. It like collapses down into like a little container. But yeah, so like, boom, that's what the green screen actually looks like. And then you just add this chroma key filter, and the Elgato one is perfectly programmed to for the right color, that kind of green. There's a little bit of bleeding. Like I could probably make this a little bit smoother, maybe reduce some of the spill. You could tweak the settings, but the default settings just work absolutely fine. Like you can see here, I'm a little bit translucent now at the bottom because I changed the settings on the OBS. Oh, that's funny. Let me delete this because I fucked it up. All right, there we go. I'll just leave it default. Yeah. Yes. Big Derek. So yeah, let me get a poll. I'm going to start a poll here. What RPG are you most excited about coming out? We got D&D 2024, PF2 finalizing the remaster. We've got sort of the new 5e clones. Something else. So new 5e wannabes. So that's MCDM, Daggerheart, DC20, etc. I'm just curious. We're going to hit that poll up there. So yeah. Let's see here. Oh, Casey, awesome. Great to see you there. With that green screen, your head is enormous. Yeah, well, I made it bigger because I can actually fit on the screen. I guess a European, I can now confirm that the 4th of July is my favorite holiday. Favorite U.S. holiday, I'm sure. Dan asks, how the Dragonbane campaign shaping up? Pretty good. We've closed out about 25 or 30 of our tickets that we've been working on to try to solve or resolve certain issues. I think we have about maybe 20 left or 18 left, so we still have a couple. How's the table build coming along? Great question, Matt. Badly, but also just as planned. So we actually had Laughing Out Law, who is the patron who won the table. He was actually out here for visiting his family. He's got family kind of in the area, not like an hour away, but he was in Northeast Ohio. Let's put it that way. He came out, we took him out to dinner, we talked about it. And he said that, it's a big table and he's been meaning to kind of re-clean out his basement or his rec room. And even he hasn't gotten around to that. So it's actually kind of works out to his advantage because if we had a big table to deliver to him, he really wouldn't be ready to receive it. That being said, I bought the wood earlier this year. It has been sitting in my garage, stickered and ready to be milled up. But with the studio move out, we kind of moved everything out of the studio, and a lot of it went into storage. We got a storage unit, but a lot of it also ended up in my garage, which is also my work shop. So I'm gonna have to do some cleaning out so that we can get this milling up, and yeah, that'll be good. What's up, London? Hello. As per my previous promise, I am now one stream away from joining the Patreon. Wonderful. Well, one stream at a time. Fantastic. My own. That's a great question about which RPG you're going to play next. That's right. That's right, William. That's exactly why I did this. Let's see here. Got some people saying, Chisari says MCDM, even though the game I want to get to the table is Sword World 2.5 fan translation. Stormlight RPG. Apparently the first demos of that were available or going to be available maybe at Gen Con or something like that. So 13th Age, 2nd edition. Sweet. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm going to end the poll. So, so 40% said something else entirely. 30% said the new 5e wannabes. 27%, very close, said PF2, and only 2% of you said D&D 2024. Now, is that because you all aren't D&D fans, or is it because you don't care about the D&D 2024 remaster? I understand that this channel doesn't exactly cover a lot of 5e stuff, but it is interesting to me how, for being the largest game in the world, that the community is kind of, this community is kind of really off of it. Although, I think it's kind of interesting. I will say that I saw there was this, I think actually I might have done a show with him on Roll for Combat, but there was this guy, Anton, I think Icarus Games is his name. And I saw that he was one of those people who, like, when the OGL happened, he was like, oh, I'm switching to Pathfinder 2. This game is so much better. And then I just saw he just released a video where he's like, we're going back to D&D. And I was like, oh, I'm sure that the view count on your channel probably had a lot to do with that. I'm sure it plummeted. It might have spiked initially because everybody was really pumped, but I'm sure it's reset to normal. Hey, super chat coming in from our buddy Cal. Cal says, I put up a post for more playtesting in community games. I've been testing it in Caverns of Thracia with my friends so far, and they like it. Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, number one, Caverns of Thracia is a great game, or a great module. So especially if you have sort of an old school type game, but also that's a great use of the KOLC community. I mean, that's a fairly I would say it's a fairly advanced level of RPG player who have a pretty solid working understanding knowledge of various mechanics and ideas, and they're going to be able to not only play in a game that you're potentially playtesting, but also provide what I think would be very valuable resources and insights. So hopefully you get some people interested. If not, I'll push it. I think look, I'm no game designer, and I've said that before. But if somebody wants to try it out, I think I would definitely encourage that, and I would definitely encourage anybody in our Knights of Last Call community. If somebody is trying something out or is trying to push through and maybe get something published, I think we should support that as a community. I think that's pretty good. Leland says, most of the 5.5 edition stuff is just same old stuff. Game's going to have the same issues as 5e if you don't like it. Well, that's probably true. I mean, they definitely don't want to alienate their existing player base, You literally came here for all the non-D&D content. Well, that is pretty much what we've done. I think we've only ever done like one or maybe like 1.5 5th edition streams ever. But yeah, so any case, it's kind of interesting. I don't know what I'm interested in myself. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in chat. We're not like diving into any PDFs today, so I'm basically reading the chat as it scrolls through. So ask me questions or want to get my thoughts on something, or just kind of want to pick my brain, or you have an opinion and you want to know what I think about it. Please let me know. I will say, I was talking with, so I got my Gen Con badge. It came like after I got back from Origins. I forgot to cancel it. So, $125 or something, $130, because it's a 4-day badge. And I haven't taken off any time from work or anything like that, but it does seem like it's a waste to not go at all, especially since Indianapolis is only like 4.5, 5 hours away. The thing is, if you saw me at Origins, you know that like I go back to my room like 5 times a day. I take naps. Okay. Yes. I go back, I take naps, but also I typically bring a lot of stuff. Like I bring games, I bring duffel bags of games, board games. I bring whole RPGs, whole setups. I bring my poker chips and maps and pens and dry erase markers so that we could play map games. So it's like, I have a lot of stuff. Well, so this is why, again, I don't understand why people are like, if my hotel room is 30 minutes away by Uber or by car, like how am I taking that stuff to the convention? And the answer is you're not. So I think part of the problem, and maybe I didn't do a good job of this when I explained this about my thing with Gen Con, maybe people don't, I'm not in the, I don't know where they are. I'm not in the 80-90% of people who go to Gen Con who are just like, I am a consumer. I am just here to have other people entertain me and maybe not even buy stuff. Because that's another thing, right? Like sometimes, Smith was at Origins for half a day and he ended up with probably 50 pounds of books in his backpack. What's he going to do? Schlep that around all day? No, I mean, he took it up to his hotel room. So any case, the point is I wouldn't want to do 4 days like that. But, could I do 1 day like that? Drive in, hang out all day, maybe drive out of the city, get a cheap motel somewhere, and then drive back the next morning? Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't be bringing any of my RPGs. I wouldn't be bringing any of my board games. I'd be traveling super light, like when I was hiking, ultra light, because I wouldn't want to carry that around all day. I'm genuinely curious what the con experience is like for people are. Let's see here. Question. What's your opinion on Morkborg art? My brother thought it was the worst art he saw, but I rather enjoy the art. I agree with Danny. I actually don't like the art in Morkborg. I don't like the art style, and I don't like the graphic design. Like, I wouldn't like the pieces of art anyways, but I also don't like how, like, the text can sometimes be hard to read just because of how in your face and over the top, and it's all, lurid and clashing, and I just find it to be very distracting, for sure. That may be something to pitch to developers. Make us, look, I'm not trying to, like, if people want to play, they should play. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to monetize everything, Mike. I'm not trying to monetize everything. Although, I mean, because the last thing I want is, like, for people to join us just to be like, oh, I just joined. I have no interest in your community. I just want to use you to play test my game. That's, like, my biggest fear. Like, if we have a honest to God community member, someone who, in fact, like, as an example, Cal is someone who's very involved with our community. So when Cal says, hey, I have a game and I'd like to play test it, I'm like, absolutely. If some new person joined and was just like, here, play test my game, I'm setting up a bunch of stuff, I'd be much more hesitant to even allow that, because I don't want someone just coming in trying to use our community. I want, if you're a member of this community, if you are a part of it, then, again, the money that is involved with the Patreon is only part of being part of the community. The other part of being part of the community is being part of the community and, like, participating and sharing and playing and conversating. I mean, I get we have people who lurk, and that's totally fine. But yeah, anyways, I don't want to just turn us into some, like, to just shill out for somebody else's, game design. If jazz were visual art. Yeah, it's just not my style. Plus, like, the whole Morkborg, this is not really the art's fault, but it's all part of this, idea that I don't like, where, like, this sort of OSR style of, like, look how grimdark and everything is horrible and it's it's so extreme, it's so edgy. That isn't my cup of tea as much. I've always thought D&D was silly, and not like in, cute raccoon people and leshies. I just mean, like, in, like, Qual's feather token way, Big B's grasping hand, right? Big B's forceful hand, that kind of silly. It's absurd. It's not like deliberately silly or cute. It's just absurd. Yes, Bob, the Swan Boat. London with the super chat says, monetize this. Well, I mean, technically, London, this is monetized. I mean, this is how I'd rather, get the money, is people tipping, showing their support, asking great questions, being members of the community through the Patreon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, Cal, but also too, I mean, quite frankly, like, if somebody, there's a difference between playtesting something, then it's just like, are there any good ideas here, versus somebody giving somebody a very, a very half finished game and then expecting them to sort of be able to piece it together. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can actually put together, like, a something that actually is a functional system, then I would definitely encourage people to do it. I would even plug it on the Discord and say, hey, people should check out this game. And even if you're not going to play test it, maybe take a look through the rules set and let us know what you think, at least on a reading. It may not be as valuable as play testing, but it's still valuable. Maybe editing mistakes or things that aren't clear, or just maybe obvious mechanical flaws that the text seems to read out. Aaron, that's actually also a good point. Aaron says, I've never actually heard anyone talk about Morkborg's mechanics, just the art. Yeah, I agree. Dr. Waite says, I wish OSR wasn't so edgy and grim. We never played it that way back in the day. And I think that is, for me, that has been true. I don't know that that's true for everybody, but I also agree. Wacky. Yeah, wacky. Hijinks, wacky. Golden Cat has work to do today. I'm sorry. That must have been why you were just posting in the Dragontide forums about mementos and trying to convince me to do something else because you were too busy at work. So I may end up going to Gen Con, TLDR, but if I do, it'll probably just be for a day, maybe a day and a half, drive out in the morning, hang out at the con, get a hotel room, stay one night, hit up the con for a little bit in the morning, and then, leave in the afternoon, be home by the evening. Probably not enough time to really, quote unquote, do anything, but look around and maybe see some folks and stuff like that. Derek, the people who make Morkborg should absolutely make Morkborg. People love it. I mean, there's a lot of people who really seem to dig it. And even if they only dig it for the art, whatever, I mean, there's value and beauty and aesthetic. It's just not for me. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't mean that it's bad. I just don't think it's for me. And in fact, actually, I don't really, know the exact precise mechanics of Morkborg, so I couldn't even tell you if they were bad or not, Yeah, exactly. It's a different type of style and niche. I'm just saying it's not for me. Have I checked out Death in Space? I have not. I did not. I've heard of it, maybe. Yeah, hides his eyes. Good luck. Good luck on that. Apparently, I was reading that apparently Labor is expected to crush. Is that what I read? I'm not sure. The Tories are getting crushed. Labor is going to do well. Tories are going to get crushed. That's what I read. But I'm not 100% sure how the party system works over there. Looks like a done deal. Well, good luck. Over here, we basically have our conservatives and we have our liberals. We have our Republicans and our Democrats. And at this point, I think they all kind of suck, but it is what it is. America, July 4th. I actually used to be kind of a pretty big student of American history. My dad was really into the Civil War. And as a kid, he dragged me around a couple battlefields. And as a kid, I hated it. But now as an adult, I think I appreciate it much more. That's the most Bob statement of all time. Hey, I'm going to a pool party. I'm going to bring books to read. Yeah. Oh, that's true. You do hate the sun. All right. Fair enough. Why don't you solve all of our Dragontide issues, Bob? We got to figure all this stuff out. But yeah, we also kind of another kind of take place. Was he a Civil War gamer? No. My dad was not pretty much not a gamer at all. Actually, like growing up, he played a lot of Risk, but I don't think he was much of a gamer in that respect. So no Civil War. He just liked he likes history in that respect. And again, the problem was when I was a kid, I only thought like knights and like swords were cool. And the idea of like a battle fought with, guns was very unappealing to me and seemed very lame. Not that I'm glorifying battle, but I do find that the study of history, military history is pretty interesting, even in the context of warfare in the modern era. World War I is probably the war I actually probably know the least about. I know a fair amount about Civil War and World War II, and even the Revolutionary War to a certain extent. Yeah, a lot of people have said they've been very happy with their Mothership fulfillment. That game did very well for itself, and they should be very proud of that. Yeah, exactly. Bob, I expect a pool party mechanic to be put into our into our game. Well, I used to play a ton of Axis and Allies. That was like my favorite board game of all time. I mean, I used to play that many, many, many times. But not as much anymore. I got into Euro games, and I liked the economic resource building. I liked the idea of a non-zero sum game. While I still think that Ameritrash games are still fun board games. My wargaming kind of shifted from that to more like Warhammer, and such. That's pretty sweet, Jonas. Very similar to me, except not my dad. It was actually my dad's youngest brother, my uncle, who passed away years ago. But when I was a kid, a young teen, he kind of indoctrinated me into video gaming, board gaming, role-playing gaming. So very similar to that as well. But have I ever heard of the Battle of Cannae? Yes, I do. I have studied some ancient history as well. Got to ask, what Axis and Allies edition did you play? Well, I started with the original Milton Bradley, Game Master edition, right when like tanks were like 3/2, before they added artillery pieces and stuff like that. So the original. And I played that for many, many, many years. And then when they released the third edition, the revised edition or whatever, the one in the smaller box that had like tanks that were like 3/3, and it had the artillery pieces. I'm trying to think if they added anything else. They had like the strategic advantages that they kind of changed in that version of the game. That was the one that changed from like, it had like the victory point centers. That one was really good. I actually did like that. And around that time, I also started playing like Axis and Allies Pacific, Axis and Allies Europe, Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge, Axis and Allies Guadalcanal, Axis and Allies D-Day. So those were like the sub games. And then my one buddy had the Axis and Allies Collector's Edition, where like Italy was a playable faction. Australia, New Zealand, Anzac was a playable faction. You had a Chinese faction, which usually I think got controlled by the Americans. But and that was like the super huge board, and I think that had the trucks. I didn't play that one too many times. By that point in time, I wasn't playing as much Axis and Allies, but I played them all, basically. Long story short. How's my Warhammer Old World army coming around? Not a single thing has been clipped out. It is not moved at all. I have no place to play, and I have no one to play it with. And that has really stymied my enjoyment of it. My plan was to buy a house, finally have room to set stuff up, and get a cool painting station set up with a nice little desk where I could just leave everything. But I only have, like, in my house, I have this room, which I'm in right now, my streaming room, and it does have a desk. But to be clear, I mean, maybe I'll put a picture, but it's like my desk does not look like a normal person's desk because I've got microphones and I've got audio interfaces. I have a massive light that's like right here that hangs over the monitor. It's just not a very comfortable space to hang out. It's basically been designed entirely for doing this, for streaming. And then in my bedroom, I have a desk, but that's my work. That's where I work from home. And it's got, again, all my work stuff, multiple monitors. So I don't really have a place where I can, like, hang out and, paint. So I was hoping to get a house and set that up and just have a nice extra room or spot in the basement. I don't have a basement where I live. And I could just, clip and paint and then build up an army. So I thought it was pretty cool. Did you call my friend that I referred to? I think you'd be surprised with what you can do. I did not, but I will say, Mike, I am moving more and more towards building over buying. Like, I just cannot find a house, and rightfully so. I mean, I'm a single guy who has a live-in dependent of sorts, adult. I have 2 dogs. I don't ever plan to get married or have kids. I have a lot of hobbies, some of which are very expansive in terms of how much space they take. I want to have a woodworking studio, but also a YouTube studio, a woodworking shop, but also a YouTube studio. It's very difficult. And some of these bigger homes, like, for example, that I can see that have enough space for all my different things. And then I'm like, oh, but it has a pool. I don't want a pool. Like, there are things that a lot of these, like, quote unquote, nicer houses have that I actually don't want, because I don't want to take care of it. And I know I'm not going to use it. And, you know, it's not worth it to me to have that. Anyways, so it's been a struggle, and the prices are just absolutely out of pocket. I am watching the hot dog eating contest. How many hot dogs could you eat in one sitting, Derek? Oh, that's a great question. The answer actually has a lot to do with how fat am I? And the reason I say that is because through most of my 20s, through high school, I was fairly active. I played hockey and stuff like that. And then even in college, I was, moving around, walking around a lot. But when I got out of college, I gained a lot of weight. And I went from probably like 200s, into like the 320s or 330s. And I was there for many, many years. Okay. And then in my late 20s, I got into running. I got into working out. I learned about primal eating, paleo eating. I was, low carb, no carb, just meats and veggies and occasional fruits for many years. And I lost a ton of weight. I went down to like 190, 185, great shape. I found that after that happened, my stomach had stayed the same size, but I'd lost all of the belly fat, and I could eat a incredible amount of food. Like, I could pack it in there. But as the pandemic hit and I wasn't doing anything again, I wasn't going to the gym and all this other stuff, and I regained weight, I was probably like 230, 240. And then as I pushed up through 300 again, I found that I could eat less. Now, right now, I'm back down to into the 250s, almost, 240s now. And I found that I can eat more. So the answer, that's a long way of saying maybe it depends. I mean, if we're just talking about a normal size hot dog on a normal size bun with maybe like a line of mustard or a line of ketchup, not like full of chili and cheese, I think I could probably do like 5 or 6, maybe 7 if I really pushed it. So Jerry coming in with $10. Thank you, Jerry. Fading Suns 4th edition is on Bundle of Holding. Any experience with the game? Jerry, thank you for the super chat. No, the only thing that about Fading Suns that I am aware of is that when Fading Suns 1st edition came out, and I want to say that Fading Suns 1st edition came out sometime in the late 90s. Let me see here. I remember seeing advertisements. Yeah, came out in 1996. And I remember seeing advertisements for it, particularly in Dragon magazine. And I thought the premise was really cool. I had not really played a space game, but I was such a huge Star Wars and Star Trek fan. But I didn't want to play in a Star Wars or Star Trek game. The idea of playing in one of these existing IPs never appealed to me. And I remembered like the Fading Suns was like, and I think right around that time, like Event Horizon came out, which was like a space horror film, but there was still kind of like that weird kind of gothic decaying vibe in space thing, this mystery of why the suns are fading or whatever. It just felt kind of a little bit grimdark. So there was like a hint of Warhammer 40K, which I was just starting to get into. And so I always thought it looked really, really cool. But I literally never knew a single person who played it. I never saw a copy of it at my FLGS. I never sat down to play a game of it at a convention. So I actually have zero experience with the game. I only know of its existence and a little bit of its premise from advertisements and a little bit of research that I had done, back in 1997 or something like that. A KLC bunker would be pretty awesome. It would finally allow me to escape from all the hate. Yeah, come over to Bob's house, painting with the kids. That sounds like a blast. You know me, Bob. I love those kids. Buy a house in Poland. Well, that is an option. Or Switzerland to make every problem worse. All right, fantastic. Yeah, 6. Okay. I mean, I will say, if they were $1, I could probably eat 6 for sure. I mean, if they were like $5 or $6 like they are, or $8 or whatever at a normal game, yeah, that'd be tough to spend $40 on that. But see, that's what I'm saying. Rule of cool. Sometimes the skinnier guys are always the ones that win those eating contests. You know, because when you're heavier and you have more visceral and subcutaneous body fat in your abdominal, it constricts the ability of your stomach to stretch. You know, you have fat there in the spaces. So when you're thinner, there's more room for hot dog. So this is a great stream. We're talking about hot dog eating contest. Try going to a Mariners game. The prices are ludicrous. I mean, they're ludicrous all over the place, but I imagine like in a big, expensive market, up tier market like Seattle, it's even more ridiculous than it is down in Cleveland. But I will say also that we got together last Friday and we played Forbidden Lands, which we hadn't played since before we went to Origins, so it had been a couple of weeks. And you know, I've talked about this on the stream, but you know, I've been enjoying Forbidden Lands. I know Bob has been enjoying Forbidden Lands. I think my other players are enjoying Forbidden Lands. I don't think Smith is enjoying Forbidden Lands as much. I think he enjoys getting together, and there's definitely moments of fun that he's having. But I think his choice to be a spellcaster in Forbidden Lands is part of the reason why he's not having a good time. Just because the way that I think Smith thinks about role playing games and he interacts with them. The willpower system of Forbidden Lands and needing it and, you know, having to push in order to get willpower just so that you can cast spells. It's just not his cup of tea. But I mean, there's still cool, fun moments that he enjoys. That being said, I brought this up on Friday. We were waiting originally for Tim to get there. You know, we've gone through about 10 sessions now, Forbidden Lands, and we're supposed to play weekly. So I thought 10 sessions. I thought, well, we're probably not going to play this game for, you know, 40 sessions or 50 sessions. Because, I mean, there's very few games that I actually want to play for 30 or 40 or 50 sessions. You know, I'd pretty much be happy with most games that I play from here on out being between 10 and 20 sessions. But I was like, well, Forbidden Lands, we'll play 10 to 20 sessions. We'll see how it goes. And I thought 10 to 20 sessions would take us like a few months. Well, we started playing in February. It's July. So it's been, 6 months, and we've made it through 9 sessions. And that's just because of how slow things have been happening. And so even though we're just now at 10, you know, I told the group, I said, look, realistically, I don't want to be playing this game into next spring. And I would really like to maybe, you know, try out a different game. Although I do have some issues with Forbidden Lands. With the mechanics, and I didn't really try to house rule them too much, although I do think that there are some things that you could change. I do think it would meaningfully change the game around. But you know, there are some problems I have with the game. But for the most part, I think it's totally fine. I think it's totally fun. I just want to try other stuff. You know, I'm not so, you know, ADHD like Bob. No offense, Bob. Where like Bob was like, let's play a session for like let's play a game for one session, and then let's play a completely different system the next week, and then let's play a completely different system the next week. That way, in 8 weeks, we play 8 different systems. I don't think my brain could handle that. And part of the reason for that is the nature of me with role playing games is I want to dig deep. You know, I want to really get into the nooks and crannies of a game and really examine it at a close level, and that's very hard to do when you're just quickly reading up on a game and then moving on to the next one. Now that's true, Bob. That actually is true. If you stick to the same core system, to be clear, this is what a lot of people did for many years with D20 games. You were basically playing, I'm playing a new game. I'm playing Star Wars. Yeah, but it's still D20. I'm playing a modern, retelling. I'm playing like a modern espionage game. Okay, but it's D20. So, Free League games kind of work in that same gist. So there's something to be said about that. So actually, I think that is a valid tactic. Sorry. But so anyways, I brought up the idea that, and again, we're not going to quote unquote beat Forbidden Lands. It's not like a campaign that it's not like an adventure path. Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that could happen in the narrative, but mostly I wanted to just explore the space, see if the group could carve out a little area, build a stronghold, maybe do one or two really cool, big, awesome things that could have a sizable impact on the surrounding terrain. And they've managed to do most of that, and we're kind of coming to a head. And so, anyways, long story short, I got to start thinking about maybe what my next campaign is going to be, and what it should be given the realities of my gaming situation. And by that I mean my real life in-person gaming situation, which is I got busy guys who are members of my group. I've got people like Smith and Kaz and Tim who are frequently called away because of family and other responsibilities, work responsibilities. Bob has kids and a wife, and sometimes it's, hey, I can't come tonight, I got to watch the kids. The wife's at a bocce tournament. That happens. I go on vacation. So obviously, the idea that we're playing every week is just not something that is probably going to happen. But at the same time, I want it to be a meaningful experience. So I want it to be a game that everybody's excited about. So this is always kind of an exciting part of the game. Exciting part of a thing is thinking about what new game to play. But yeah, and the answer is I don't actually know. That's the reason why I'm bringing this up is I don't really know what I want to play. I don't have a good answer. Because I don't know what I want out of a game right now. Let's see here. Let's see. MCRP, curious to know if you've played the One Ring. Currently going through the rule book and it looks interesting. Will definitely room a short campaign with the system, despite my resistance to play it. Which One Ring? Are you talking about the first edition or second edition? The one from Cubicle 7 or the one from Free League? Because I own both. I think it's okay. I think there's some interesting things there. There's actually a version that they did for both for 5th edition. I think it's called Adventures in Middle Earth is maybe what it's called for 5th edition. And I think Cubicle 7 did one. I don't know if Free League did a 5th edition version, but Cubicle 7 did Adventures in Middle Earth for 5e. And I actually thought there was some pretty cool stuff in there with the shadow and the corruption and all that other stuff, which I thought was kind of neat. And the way that the journey systems works is pretty cool, along with the, what do they call them? The places where you can actually rest. I can't remember the term they call them. Not strongholds, but, safe spots. I don't remember, like Rivendell, Lorien. I can't remember exactly what they call them. Exactly. And I feel the same way Hides his eyes. One session is not enough unless the game is literally designed to be played in one session. There is no continuation. It's a single page game. What's going to be next on the game setting stream? Hopes for Eberron. Well, if we went strictly based off of votes, I think it would be Eberron. I think maybe, but I'll probably do another Patreon vote now that we've done Birthright. That was a lot of fun. The Birthright stream, kickstarted a lot of conversations. I was talking because Smith and Kaz didn't see it, and so I was telling them about it. They were all like, "Wow, this is really kind of cool. This is kind of sweet. I'd love to, dive into that." So I'm not saying we're going to do a Birthright campaign, but people were there were a lot of people, even in my own home group, that were pretty excited about some of those mechanics. And there were definitely people on the stream, especially our Pendragon crowd, that were kind of like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And there's a lot of fun, neat stuff in there. So anyways, point is, it was a good stream. We did really well with that. So we're definitely going to do another one. We'll probably do a Patreon vote. But like I said, Birthright that stream was an example of a game I never owned, never played, and I hadn't read it until just that, like last week, where I bought it and flipped through it before, as prep for the stream. If we're talking about Forbidden Lands, if we're talking about Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Dragonlance or, games where I have run many, many campaigns, then we can go really deep into the tank for sure. Let's see here. Boothby is running 2 PF2 games, a Dune 2D20, Alien, and prepping Pulp Cthulhu. Yeah, you're a madman. That's just way too much. I mean, to be clear, in theory, I'm going to do that as well because I'm going to be running a game for my home game group. Right now we're playing Forbidden Lands, but my guess is by the end of summer, we'll probably be playing something different. And then for the community, for the patrons, I'm going to be running a game of Avatar, Blades in the Dark, Scum and Villainy, and Legend of the Five Rings. Maybe there weren't that many people signed up for Legend of the Five Rings, and eventually run hopefully either like definitely run some 4E D&D games, and maybe even Forbidden Lands. Although I think the Forbidden Lands will probably not happen because now that we have Dragontide, I don't think it is as needed. Right, the greatest player and the greatest GM, yes. You should try Burning Wheel. Yeah, I've owned Burning Wheel since the beginning. I have the gold edition. I have the original editions with the character burner and stuff like that. The game is. Here's the thing. We've talked about this on the streams before. The game is very interesting to me. I'm not sure that it is fun for me. For me, and to the point where I would be entertained. The game seems to be convoluted in a way that for some people is very compelling, and for me it isn't. Maybe it's time to pull out an FU campaign. Well, the thing about it is, I actually don't know how well Fabula Ultima would work with my home group. Believe it or not. And I'm not really sure why that is. Even though these are people who really like Final Fantasy games, a lot of them do anyways, or they're kind of into anime. I just have a sense that it would not work out. I don't know why. Maybe there's something to be talked about there, and we could kind of think through it. But my instinct, I think, is that there's a Fabula Ultima in many ways is like Fate. And I think Fate has the same problem with my group, which is my group likes to get away with stuff because of the fiction and because they feel clever, right? My groups are very, in my opinion, my groups tend to be very high on the player skill matters part of RPGs. And games like Fabula Ultima and Fate rely on meta currency mechanics. So it's like, well, the player doesn't have to necessarily be clever. They have to just be able to spend this meta currency point. And if you have the meta currency point, the idea is that you kind of can get it. And, obviously you're supposed to tie it to the fiction. And if you don't have the meta currency point, then you can't. And that's kind of, I think, where my group runs into a roadblock occasionally. And now, don't get me wrong. I think Fabula Ultima is incredible and amazing. And it's for me, Derek, I think does a lot of things that I would really want a campaign and a game system to do. But my game group in general, I think my home game group, that is, I think approaches RPGs a little bit more as a competition than as a collaboration. Maybe that's what I'm actually getting at. I think they tend to view the game as more of a competition, a puzzle to solve, rather than a collaborative storytelling experience. And so I found that the games over the many years that I've played them, where the game system doesn't really, it's sort of just like designed to sort of be like, yeah, totally do that thing. My group doesn't respond as well to that. Yes, Dr. Waits, Havens. That's what I was thinking of. Close enough. It's DERIK, but whatever. Free market. Yeah, that's not going to be it. Birthright. Again, I was blown away. I was by how much I was like, wow, this is much more interesting and complicated than I thought it was. And obviously, when something's interesting, I mean, for me, that's right. And this is what, again, in that stream, I say fun is one thing, interesting is one thing, right? But your entertainment from that is separate. Something could be really fun, but not entertaining to you. There's plenty of things out there that are very fun, and I don't find them entertaining. but I can acknowledge that this was clearly designed for fun. And there are definitely things out there that are really, really interesting and complicated. And that's very entertaining to you. But you have to admit that this wasn't designed for fun. It was designed to be complex and intricate and involved. And you might find great entertainment from that, but it's not designed to be fun. So yeah. Let's see here. Jay is all cut up. Sweet, sweet, sweet. I tried Burning Wheel. I didn't like it. Yeah, again, I think for me, it's more academic. That's not saying it's a bad game. I'm just saying that there are, and I definitely love Torchbearer and Mouse Guard, but I've also never run a long duration campaign of Mouse Guard or Torchbearer. I've only ever run them like, 3 sessions, 4 sessions before it kind of just, we went on to do other things, usually it's like a palate cleanser between D20 campaigns, right? I call Burning Wheel my favorite game to read, not play. Yes. Yeah, I've enjoyed reading through the books over the years for sure. Is covering so many games on the channel giving you analysis paralysis? Oh, Alexander, I owned all these games long before I ever had a YouTube channel. Trust me. I mean, I probably do look at more games now than I used to, but this has been a problem for a long time. Not a new problem. I was in Italy recently, so I bought Fabula Ultima in the original language. That's sweet. A friend of mine is going to run the starting adventure this weekend, which is great. Press start is amazing. If I'm bored, it's 100% on you. No. It's very good. It's a very good game. But again, it is designed for a collaborative experience. It is designed. It's not really designed to test your player skill to see if you as a play group can overcome the challenges that the game engine / game mechanics / game challenge foes / game master are throwing in your face. It is really designed as a sort of a narrow mechanical interface that allows you to move through game actions and generate game results as a result. By the way, to a certain extent, some games like Blades in the Dark are like this as well. But games that have a meta currency in particular are pretty clear indications of that to me. All right, hide size. So I so want to play FU. I'm worried, I think is what you meant. My group also wouldn't like it for similar reasons. Yeah, and I do think that there is a trad bias, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. That's what people like. Some people play games because they enjoy the challenge, the sort of puzzle aspect of the game. They enjoy having to, solve problems and figure out how to use the limited resources or the limited mechanics of the games in order to overcome challenges. Or they enjoy, working with the fiction and coming up with some clever approach that the game rules can't handle, but because I'm such a smart player and I'm so clever, I get this advantage. I get this win. I get this free win. I joke despairingly when people talk about combat as war. I really call it, combat as win, because, when people are playing combat as war, but basically what they're saying is, I want to win. And, the game rules aren't really allowing me to do that. So I'm going to start thinking outside of the game rules, which is fine. That's why it's called combat as war. You're just trying to win. But I think that for some people who are a little bit more dialed in, they've been playing RPGs for a very, very long time. When you play a game with meta currencies, it can take away some of the enjoyment of feeling like you won. And I will say that some modern D20 games, Pathfinder 2 is probably the most one that I could think of egregious of this. You're ostensibly playing to win, but the game has been so carefully designed so that you can win. It starts to feel like it's not challenging you either, even though it's set up as a challenge-based game. If that makes any sense. No, that's great. I think Fabula Ultima is easily in my top 10 games of all time, and I've never run a full campaign of it. So without even playing it, really, I think it's so clever. I think it's so innovative. It uses some really great mechanics that have from the pedigree of John Harper and stuff like that, but it does it in a really interesting and innovative way, and really nails the emulation of the JRPG console genre. So I think it's really great. So, you can't use FB, I think you mean fate points, unless you can make it work in the fiction. Correct. But to be clear, it's still reliant on the Fabula point meta mechanic, right? You still are operating under this guise of, in order to do these things, you need Fabula points. Would you run Birthright in AD&D for the adventure side or some other system? I'm learning something different. Oh, I would not use AD&D. No. In fact, I would actually say Birthright. I mean, most of the mechanics have very little to do with AD&D. So you're actually pretty much in the clear to try to do something else. Now that you talk about it, I definitely lean hard into the puzzle aspect. Yeah, and I think a lot of people do. That for them, the enjoyment of the role-playing game is, overcoming those challenges. And when a game kind of gives you these, get out of jail free cards or whatever, these things, it takes away some of the enjoyment of the game. All right. Well, this is exactly why we're doing this. Glad to have you here, Emmy. And the VOD Lurker is live. So that's fantastic. The illusion of challenge. That's correct. It's very casual, Beowulf. We've just been hanging out. I mean, we covered hot dog eating contest, and we covered other stuff, But yeah, it's been super casual. Warhammer Fantasy has several different kinds of meta currency. It confuses me. Are we talking about like Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition? I didn't know that they had meta currency in that game. There are 3.5 hacks for Birthright. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would use 3.5 either. But that would also be pretty cool, I think, for sure. Oh, 4th edition. I don't know Warhammer. I don't know Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition. I stopped with 3rd edition, the one with all the different weird dice. Ever since the Birthright, I've been thinking on what fiction first system would merge best with the ideas of Birthright. Any inputs? Pendragon for Birthright. Well, I don't necessarily know that Pendragon is fiction first. I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know that there's an easy answer for that. 13th Age for Birthright. Actually, I don't mind that. Dungeon World has its own problems. Oh, Pendragon plus Fate. Okay, well now we're coming in here. You got to leave Lord of the Aces. Well, cheers to you from the Czech Republic. I enjoyed my time in the Czech Republic. I went there once. Very beautiful country. Some people don't perceive the fiction as an interactable or satisfying game board to play on. These are the ones who feel like it's all just cheating, whether the player or GM touch the sacred fictional tapestry. Well, it's more like, and I've talked about this before. Okay, for me, or I think there's a core ethos. I'm truly trying to avoid going to the whiteboard here because I don't really know what I would draw, so I'm going to try to explain it. There is a core group of players, and I think this goes back to the very heart of RPGs. Okay, so for the people who were playing RPGs for the first time in the 1970s and the 1980s, and I think that DNA is imbued in a lot of my players. So what is that DNA? What is that mindset? Here's the mindset. This is what role-playing games, I think, means to, when I say my players, I don't mean anyone in particular. I just mean my group that I've been playing with for 20 plus years, the sort of the way that we've always approached RPGs and the way that we think about them is, imagine playing a game, like a board game, and it's the 1970s, and you're playing a board game, okay? And you roll your die, and that tells you how many pieces you can move. But this is a different board game. It's a board game with wizards and warriors, and you're basically playing, Hero Quest, okay? And in fact, that was Hero Quest. It's actually right here in the closet above me. Hero Quest was like my first introduction to fantasy gaming. And Hero Quest, although it kind of had a game master, you weren't really a game master in the sense that you didn't get to just make stuff up. At least, when I read the rule book, it wasn't. You just ran the monsters, and you saw where the hidden map was, so you could tell them, oh, that was a trap. Okay. But there was no back and forth. But you had the framework for a game. You had a framework for, you have this many hit points, and your warrior can make this attack. And everything is sort of laid out as a board game. And as a player, when you're playing Monopoly or you're playing some other board game, and you're like, oh, I have a really cool idea. Well, the game says you can't do anything with that. It's a board game. You have to follow the rules. And it can be very frustrating because you're like, yeah, but my idea is so good, and I get why it doesn't work because we're playing a board game. Role-playing games is basically the idea of you're playing a board game. It has these rules which limit you. They tell you what you can do, and they tell you what you can't do. So they're very limiting. But role-playing games basically let you play Hero Quest. But now you can be like, but what if we did this thing instead? And there's no rule for that. And it feels kind of like you're cheating as a player. It feels kind of like you're really smart. And so you are beating the game. You are ahead of the curve. You've figured out some exploit, right, to beat the game better, right? And I think that for a lot of role players, that is something that they really engage with. Now, this is independent of like the story and the narrative, right? And that became a thing, I think, later on. The story or the narrative of these role-playing games, these sort of core, is that basically like when you look back, after the session or months later after the session, you look back at the session and go, oh, our story was this. So I think that that's where that empowering concept of role-playing games comes from, is the idea that you're basically saying, here are the rules to the game. Here's what you're trying to do. And you have to follow the rules. And then a player goes, okay, but what about this really cool idea I have? And then the GM goes, okay, yeah, that would work. And the player goes, okay, so now I'm going to get this big advantage that doesn't exist in the game, and that's going to make me feel like I got away with something, like I was so clever, I was so smart, I figured it out, I broke the system, yeah, and that enjoyment of being like feeling like you won. And the problem is that game designers realized, hey, that is part of the fun part of playing role-playing games. So let's mechanicize that. And that's how you end up with like skills and feats. And that's why choosing a skill or a feat for my group has never been super satisfying, because now it's just another game mechanic. All you've done is just make the game more complicated, being able to power attack wasn't what made power attacking fun. What made power attacking fun was that power attack didn't exist. It wasn't a thing in the game. You were sort of, again, getting away with something, being clever, being sneaky. And it was about you, the player, not your character sheet, not your player character sheet. Now the problem, as you say, is why we prefer OSR. The problem is that now the games have gone too far backwards because now the game mechanics themselves are horrible. I think a lot of these OSR games are really, really, they're too primitive. They don't have enough interesting mechanics in them because the game itself still needs to be fun. The game itself still needs to be entertaining. And so my group likes having crunch and mechanics, but they don't want a game that basically says, hey, you know, all that cool, fun, getting away with stuff, you know, type activities that you love getting away with. You can do those, but they're mitigated or they're moderated by this meta currency called momentum, called hero points, called fabula points. So, and again, this I am uniquely describing my group, and I am sort of generalizing. I'm sort of amalgamating, you know, Smith, Bob, Kaz, Tim, George, you know, other people who've played with us over the years, Rich and Larry, and just kind of combining them all into this kind of like one monolithic entity. So it sounds like your players want moment-to-moment freeform, but session rules and structures like Blades in the Dark. Now, Dan, I think you're right, actually. It's one of the reasons I like Blades in the Dark. And I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go to the whiteboard. Blades in the Dark provides a mechanical framework for your bullshit. That's what I like about that game so much. The game is make something up, but then it has this translation system, this algorithm that lets you convert this crazy idea into something that then now interacts with the rules engine. All right. But my group has never, that again, I'm talking about my group, for the most part, have completely bounced off of the world and the structure of Blades in the Dark. They don't like the idea of the, you know, steampunk ghost death city. We played Scum and Villainy, and it seemed like it was going really, really well. But then they said it was too stressful. They were like, this game is, you know, it's too stressful. You know, we want to kind of kick ass and take names, and, you know, being always a push to the brink with trauma and, you know, all that other stuff and stress is stressing me out. I don't want to be stressed. I want to, you know, have fun. I want to kick back and I want to enjoy the game. That was kind of the problem we had with Legend of the Five Rings. Everybody was like, this is so great. This is like one of the best campaigns we've ever had. But man, like when it's Thursday and tomorrow is Friday, last day of the week, and our game session night, instead of being like, oh, this is going to be so great, I'm almost just like, you know, like I have to meditate. I have to breathe. I have to be like, okay, this is going to be tough. This is going to be a really intense session. It's going to be really, you know, it's like, look, it's like going to the movies and, you know, going to see Schindler's List. It's an incredible film, but it's like, it's not exactly what you would call like, you know, and you're like, so by the way, Schindler's List is a great example of fun and interesting. Schindler's and the separate of that from enjoying it. People really enjoy the film Schindler's List. At least I do. It is not a fun movie. Okay. It is not a fun film. So yeah, I just think that, I think some of the rock and rolling fun of those, you know, those games is missing. And my players, you know, definitely feel like, that is a problem. Dr. White says OSR doesn't understand how the game was played. I also agree with that completely as well. Hey, what's up, Sims? There needs to be a good framework. Otherwise, we're just shooting the shit around the table. And that's the problem. You know, we also, you know, when the game is too loosey-goosey, Sims, when the game is too loosey-goosey, then it feels like you're just making shit up. And I've talked before about GM bias. And this is, by the way, one of the main reasons why people, that we kind of bounce off of the OSR, is because it eventually ends up feeling just like it's just the GM Mother May I, right? And you're basically playing a game of blah, does the GM like my idea or not? Can I convince the GM that my idea is a good one? And if they agree, then they go, oh yeah, it totally works and everything is awesome. And they're just making shit up. And the game and like if you played DTX with me, if you're one of my group members, if you just played Shadow Dark with me at last Origins, we played 2 sessions of Shadow Dark that I ran. I barely knew the rules. I made shit up left and right, and it was fun. And everybody was having a great time because I was just like making shit up, making up mechanics left and right. Oh, Stephen Glicker rolled a crit with his spear while attacking, some rats, and I was like, oh, Stephen Glicker, do your damage. Well, that did 15 damage. Well, the first rat only had 5 hit points, so the spear keeps going. It hits the next rat. He has 5 hit points. He dies. It goes to the third rat. Okay, that guy, doesn't have enough damage to kill him, so. You kill 3 rats and the spear is stuck in a 4th. And then, dwarf, you're really drunk? Oh, well, here's a druck lunk points that I'm just completely making up. And you can spend them, but if you fail, and to get a reroll, but if you fail the reroll, something terrible happens to you. It's like you rolled a crit fumble because you're drunk. It's just making shit up left and right. That's a lot of fun, right? The fun, interesting access. Everybody was having fun. But I promise you that game doesn't have legs. Not Shadow Dark. I'm talking about the way that I was running Shadow Dark. And it's because the game the game lacks interest. The game doesn't have the sort of puzzle aspect. It doesn't have that element of, hey, I want to get good at this game. I think that's what it really comes down to. My players, generally, maybe not Bob, want to invest in the game. And they want to be good at it. And a game that is just completely random and has tons of variance and tons of randomness is hard to get good at because it just feels like you're playing random nonsense, right? It's a reason why we have professional poker players and we have professional Magic the Gathering players, but we don't have professional, war players, the card game War, or we don't have professional, craps players. Because it's just random. Craps is just a random game. Blackjack has some small degree of agency. So you do see people who are quote unquote blackjack experts, and certainly poker, has a lot of randomness, but also has a lot of control and player agency. Craps, you're just rolling 2d6 and seeing what the number is. Did you win or not? There's no control. And so, you don't see people playing those games. And I think that those games are fun, but because they're not interesting. Because when I go to Vegas, I actually avoid interesting games. I avoid blackjack. I avoid poker because I don't want to think. And I just want to be like, whoa, hot, feeling lucky, on a streak. Yeah, I'll make this bad bet. I don't care. Roll it. And that kind of YOLO, fun is fun. It's very fun. But I also wouldn't want to play craps every week. I play it once or twice a year and I'm very fine with it for a couple of days when I go to Vegas, and I'm fine with it. And then I'm good. And then it's done because the fun is over. It doesn't have the sort of staying potential. So if you're looking to play a campaign that is actually more, evolved, then yeah. Yeah. The more I hear this, how you feel, I feel more how polarizing my thing will be. Well, it's not for everybody. Let's see here. It varies. Not everybody likes the same thing. I mean, there are people in that group that loved 4th edition D&D. There are people in that group that hated 4th edition D&D. So it's all over the place. The problem with Pendragon is they would want to be knights. They would want, they want to have magic swords and cool laser beams or, flaming fireballs, that kind of stuff. The low fantasy, low sci-fi, very unappealing to them. Anything that's more realistic becomes unappealing to them. Yeah, I have not looked at Into the Dark by Strauss, but I'm assuming it's kind of just like a rough beta because it never actually got published or anything like that. This was so fun. Let's never do it again. Gonza, I don't know if you're making a joke, but literally that is something that I've said and Smith has said many times. So I don't think so, Simon, although they do want to play Star Trek because they just love Star Trek so much. But I think they would find momentum and threat frustrating. Sounds like your group wants to cheat, but don't want rules to cheat. I think that's actually, that is correct. Kind of. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Yes. Because if you give them rules to cheat, then you're not cheating. Right? So if it's allowed, then it's not cheating. You're not being clever. You're not being sneaky. You're not getting something else extra, right? You're not beating the game with how clever you are and how smart you are and how much you pay attention, and with your, I'm gonna take this random ability and this completely different ability, and I'm gonna take this completely different spell and this weird magical item, and I'm gonna combine them together, and I'm gonna create this kind of like horrible amalgamation that perfectly solves this problem. But generally speaking, yes, I would say that is on a high level sort of what actually might be the case. Yes, OSR equals appease the god GM. Yeah, sometimes it can feel like that. I don't mind that with one-page systems, Aranis, because I'm going to be playing it for like one session, probably. And so, I don't care about that, because that is a game that's clearly not designed to be interesting or detailed or complicated. It's just supposed to be fun, and here provide you with a loose framework, figure it out, roll it, make shit up, and then the game's over and you can move around. Let's see here. Crunchy games where you need to get good. Sounds like you should do Hackmaster lol. Jay, I mean, I know you're joking, but Smith owns all the 5th edition Hackmaster stuff and all the 4th edition Hackmaster stuff. And he like went on this big, huge, when we were talking about Hackmaster earlier this year during like one of those streams, Smith was like, holy shit. He was like bringing his Hackmaster books with him everywhere. He started rereading all of his Hackmaster games. I think he would get bored of that though. It's too crunchy. I know. It's crazy. Not too hard, not too soft. All right. Just like Motown Philly. I would rather players play the environment and situation rather than the system. Just get so far into rules lawyering. Now, Omanal, I agree with you. And in fact, so would my players. Historically, even going back to like 3rd edition, I only really had maybe one and a half players that what I would say were rules lawyers, and they don't play with us anymore. Most of the time, my groups are not rules lawyering. Ever. They are not. They are playing the fiction. 100%. So they don't want to solve the issue through some game king. Like, let me give you a good example. Okay? Let me give you a good example. Let me pull something up here. We may need to go to the PDF browser here. Hold on a sec. I don't even know where my thing is. Oh, there it is. Okay. This is a great example of what I'm talking about here. Forbidden Lands. Okay. And now let me bring up this PDF. Okay. All right. There we go. I'm going to close this off. All right. So this is Forbidden Lands. All right. So let's take a look. And also, we also have all this birthright stuff open. Close all that out. Let's take a look, and we're here as a group. We're going to go into the magic section. It's so crazy. I actually thought we were playing. Actually, I thought I had the Dragonbane PDF open because I was looking at the talents and I was like, oh, Dragon Slayer, fast footwork. I was like, oh, this is exactly the same as Dragon. Oh shit, it is exactly the same. So let's go to spells. Okay. So here's our spells section. Okay. One of the magical schools is called shapeshifting. Druids are closely connected to nature, yada, yada, yada. So this is kind of like, your druidic power thing, right? So here we go. Animal speech. All right. Actually, let's go to the next page. This is even a better example. Bear's Claw. Now, this is a rank 2 spell, which means you need to have, if you have rank 1 in shape-shifting magic, you can cast the spell, but it will trigger a miscast. It's called overcasting. Or if you're rank 2 in shape-shifting, you can cast the spell and you only have the normal chance of miscasting. Okay. But here's Bear's Claw. We can see that the range is arm's length, which basically means adjacent, in melee. The duration is immediate. The ingredient, if you want to use one, is called a Bear's Claw. You don't need an ingredient in Forbidden Lands. It just makes the spell a little bit more powerful. Okay. You can strike your enemy with the force of a great bear. You hit automatically and cause damage equal to the power level of the spell. So in Forbidden Lands, if you spend 4 willpower points, then the power level of the spell is 4. And then for each power point that you spend, you roll 1d6. If you roll a 6, then the power level goes up again by 1. If you roll any 1s, the spell is miscast, and you roll on this table of what something bad might be happened to you. So you could imagine we go to cast Bear's Claw. You spend 4 willpower points. So the power level of the spell base is 4. You then take 4d6 because power level is 4. You roll those 4d6. And let's say we don't roll any 1s. Great. We didn't miscast, but we did roll a single 6. So that means that the power level goes from 4 to 5. So we hit automatically and we cause damage equal to the power level. So 5 points of damage, which is, by the way, enough to pretty much kill anything in this game that isn't a monster. Any PC, any normal NPC pretty much die from 5 damage. Also, the attack cannot be parried and it cannot be dodged, right? Because it's a gigantic force of a great bear. Pretty simple, right? This is what this is describing, what this does. Now, when we were playing our first session of Forbidden Lands, Smith, who is playing a druid and had access to this spell, the group had made their way into an ancient burial mound. And at the back of the burial mound, they found a sealed tomb that was sealed by a great stone door rock thing. And Forbidden Lands doesn't allow you to keep spamming checks. So somebody in the player group went up, made a strength check, a might check is what I think it's called, and they failed. They weren't able to, even after they pushed, they weren't able to push the rock out of the way because it was too heavy. Now, Smith's druid isn't exactly the strongest character, but Smith went to me and he said, "Hey, Derek, I'm not just making this up out of nowhere. I'm not just making up that, oh, my character can turn into a bear and I can be really strong and hit things with great force. No. I have this mechanical thing in the game that is designed to be essentially a damaging spell. I want to use this, but instead of striking down my enemy with great force of a great bear, can I channel the strength of the great bear and instead use that to move this gigantic stone door?" That type of effect, what just happened right there, that is what my group really enjoys. Using the existing rules and extrapolating them into a fictional concept that then gets applied to other ideas in the game. So again, if you were playing rules as written, the answer would be no. You can't do that. All this does damage. But also, the group, if this spell didn't exist at all, they wouldn't want that either, where they go, Derek, I'm a druid. I'm just going to spend a fate point or whatever, and I'm going to turn into a bear, and that's going to let me move this big rock. See, that also doesn't feel very satisfying to them, because it just feels like you can just make anything up as long as it makes sense to somebody. Okay, cool, that works. This, using the spell of Bear's Claw, okay, and of course this doesn't, this doesn't translate into the game, so I had to kind of like make something up. I was like, okay, well, I said that the thing was really heavy. You needed, you need a single 6, but I was giving it 2 penalty dice. So I'm going to say that if you can get power level 3 or greater, then you can move the stone. And Smith was like, okay, sweet. I'll spend that many willpower points and I, channel the ancient power of the bear, and my kind of frail druid imbued with the power of the bear is able to move the rock. So that is an example of where, we take something that, and again, we're not trying to rules lawyer it. We're not trying to be like, well, if you read it, technically it's implying that no, we're not trying to like do it through the game mechanic. We're trying to take this game rule and really think about what does it mean in the context of the fiction? Well, in the fiction, the druid is channeling ancient primal spirits or ancient primal might, okay? And the power of the bear is being temporarily infused into them such that they're able to strike down their enemies with a great and powerful blow, such that it can't even be parried or dodged. But, okay, if I can do that, well, why can't I also use this to move something like a big stone or big heavy? Now, yes, this is a degree of GM fiat, but I think you all can clearly see that there's like this crystal, there's this nugget of fictional truth that this is based off of. All right. Another example of this, another one from Smith actually, is he has this spell, Animal Speech. This spell allows you to speak with a mammal. You can ask a number of questions equal to the power level of the spell. The animal can tell you what it has seen, heard, or smelled, but they do not perceive the world as humans do. All right? Well, Smith cast this, but he's like, hey, can I cast this on the griffin? And I was like, yeah, I guess a griffin's a mammal. I mean, a griffin is a monster, technically. It's not really an animal, but it's like, look, it's got a, lion body, and it's got a beak, but it's got wings, but it's like a mammal, it's mammal-like enough. Maybe it's a little bit weirder because it doesn't exactly translate over. But am I going to allow that? Of course I am. And maybe I'll say, you get one less question because of the strange accent or something like that. But by and large, I want players to engage with the game mechanics and the fiction of the game. But what we don't like is imagine that none of these spells existed. There were no mechanics. It's just sort of like a YOLO, do whatever, like a fate or an OSR. And basically you just had an aspect on your character sheet that said, shape-shifting magic. And you're like, well, I'm going to spend my fate point. I'm going to spend my whatever hero point, and I'm going to use it on shape-shifting. And I'm going to say, yeah, I can speak with this animal. Or I'm going to say, yeah, I can turn into a bear. That I think feels less satisfying to them. What I think they really enjoy doing is taking these already existing game elements, these rules elements, and using them in a logical but consistent fictional interface that allows them to sort of maybe get a little bit more out of it. Isn't Forbidden Lands in the OSR? I wouldn't say it is. It's definitely not. If the terminology were to be used, I would call it new SR. But even then, I think it's a little bit. I think that's a little bit counter purpose, because I think there's a lot of elements about Forbidden Lands that are actually much more forgiving than you would traditionally see in an OSR type game. Anyways, so that is a long-winded way of saying, yes, I find this tends to be more prevalent with spellcaster players. Jay, I absolutely agree with you. And I find that I think it's true that I've seen players who really like to interact with that stuff like that. And they get frustrated when they're playing a character that isn't a spellcaster. Now, I will say that traditionally, older versions of D&D had some really weird, cool, crazy, wonky magic items. And let me tell you something. I have seen some really cool, fun, silly stuff happen with things like, bottles of air, or, Nolzur's magical pigments, or, ropes of climbing. I think the non-spellcasters, the idea was you had this kind of tool belt of weird, strange, magical items, and they just kind of gave you in-game fictional levers. And instead of being defined as saying, this rope of climbing can only do this one thing, you start thinking about, you're like, well, if a rope of climbing can do that, doesn't it kind of make sense that a rope of climbing could also do this? And couldn't I use it to do that thing? And you're kind of like, yeah, maybe you could. And maybe there's a chance that it fails. Maybe there's a chance that it succeeds. And so, yeah. And I think they really enjoy that. What kind of mechanics and experiences do you think help promote this kind of behavior? I actually don't know, John. I might know, but I just don't know off the top of my head. Sorry if I missed chat. I was kind of going through the rules there. Let me see here. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of messages I missed. Sorry about that. I take the point about Mother May I, but I don't like going fully the other way either. It's frustrating when the rules stop you engaging fiction. 100% agree. And by the way, let me be very clear. If as a GM, if I ever go at my session, yep, that makes sense. That would totally work, but the rules don't allow it, so I'm not allowing it. I guarantee you that session is going to be a bad one from that point out. 100%. People are basically like, I didn't come here to play a board game. I did not come here to play a board game. If we wanted to play a board game, we would play one of these really good board games on the shelf. So I agree with you there. Fuck it, we ball. That's correct. Yes, it is subjective communication. It is imagination. It's silly to make the rules too rigorous. But, they have tried to codify the rules more and more and more, because that way you don't have to rely on the GM's, whims and biases. And that way you can deliver a more consistent experience. RPGs in some ways are like, they're like the McDonald's now, in that they're like, look, we don't care if it's a good French fry or a good cheeseburger, but we don't want individual McDonald's taking their own liberties with how the cheeseburger is being presented, because it's branded as a McDonald's cheeseburger. So if this is going to get branded as a Pathfinder 2 game or a D&D game, we want to make sure that it meets our standards and criteria. And I think that's where some of that mentalities come in. I don't think that's the case as much in the OSR community, I think. I think that's true. Boothby. Running different games has helped scratch both shenanigans and non-shenanigans game type itches. I think that's true. I could definitely see where that is a solid strategy to sort of, deal with everything. So this is my same problem, just as John. This is my same problem with American board games. It ends up seeming like you're waiting for RNGesus to bless you, all just to pretend that the randomness was deserved when you roll well. Yes, I actually agree with you. I much prefer outplaying my opponent in a Euro worker placer game, not just getting lucky and winning because well, I had to position myself for a chance to win. Yeah, I get it, but I have come to enjoy Euros more than American games, American style. Into the Dark is rough, but you're only going for like 4 to 8 sessions. It's got enough on that for that. Well, that's fine. What do you think about Ars Magica 5th edition? Iram, I did a stream on it. I did a first look. I thought it was interesting. I could see a lot of similarities between Ars Magica and Pendragon, actually. Maybe there's an overlap there, let's see here. When you exalt anything exalted plus Blades of the Dark game, never. KC, my issue with that style of play is that it becomes more about outsmarting the GM and knowing what they like than it is outsmarting the system. Right. I mean, that is the downfall. That's the big issue, right? Is it becomes more about the GM bias. And I have said before, I said GMs are biased. People are like, no, they're not. I'm like, no. They are biased. And that's probably a good thing to a certain extent, because that's why each GM has a unique flavor to the game. Yes, it corrupts the purity of the game, but we're not playing, you're not playing D&D. You're playing Derek's campaign of D&D. You're not playing, Pathfinder 2. You're playing KC's Pathfinder 2 campaign. So I think that having that, your touch on the game is not a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. Let's see here. Oh, Hackmaster has a ton of rules bloat. I mean, to the point where it's almost a parody. It's not. 4th edition was definitely a parody. 5th edition still has some very parody-like elements, and I think part of the reason people enjoy it is because of the parody. You know. But the game plays really well. I've played it actually at Gen Con many times, and I always have a blast. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying they have some of the levels of complexity that they add on top of the game. I think they're almost doing as a deliberate kind of like, isn't this ridiculous? It's so complicated, it's ridiculous, you know. My favorite style is play the fiction, backed up by solid, flexible core mechanics. Maybe surprisingly, I've had great results using lightly hacked D&D 5e for this lately. It took me a long time, though. I experienced the same thing. I ran a very fiction-first 5e campaign that was fairly house-ruled, called Dungeon Time Extreme. And I used this to run B2, Keep on the Borderlands. And it worked really, really well because it just had this very lightweight core flexible system, and it was fiction first that just relied on the backup of this really, really robust, even if it was a little simple, mechanical system. Oh no, that's not raw. The game is broken now. Beowulf, your group likes to look at a rule and then think logically about how it would affect the world if it was real, i.e. simulationism, and then apply that logic to solve issues in the fiction. Yes, I think that is true for the most part. Yeah, 101 uses for the grease spell. I mean, that's a great example of right there. I mean, there was a campaign. Smith was GMing. We were playing. We were level 1, maybe level 2 characters, and the big monster of the dungeon level was like a dire boar, which was like a CR4. This is 3rd edition, and we're level 1, you know, or 2. So fighting a CR4 dire boar is not something that we were really equipped to do. So what we did is we used several grease spells down a hallway, and then we lined the end of the hallway with a bunch of sharpened sticks, and we basically baited the boar into chasing us down the hallway, and then it charged us, and we dived out of the way, and it slipped in the grease, slid down the hallway, and impaled itself on the the 10 or so sharpened stakes at the end of the hallway. And there was not a single normal attack roll made. There were no initiative orders made, you know what I mean, like in a traditional sense, but everybody loved it. Now, what, is that complete bullshit? Yes and no, but like, we know roughly how much damage a spear does, so we can kind of estimate that as a sharpened stake. We know what the grease spell does, et cetera, et cetera. So like there is something to be said about that style of play. We also do. I mean, I enjoy also though very character, like me, Derek personally. I really love the PBTA games, and I really love those very character centric, narrative focused games, because for me, I've always had board games. I've always had board games or Magic the Gathering. I have plenty of outlets where I get to sort of come up with strategies and ways to use the rules to sort of get that I beat the game feeling of mentality. And so it's always been less of an issue for me. But I think by and large, my player group doesn't play those as much. And so they view RPGs as sort of their release valve for that, Yeah, absolutely, Irenaeus. And I will say there are, that is another part of the cost of playing this way, is that, the players at the table who are better, smarter, more creative are going to get to do and do more and be more effective. And there's not a small part of me that doesn't feel like that's okay. I mean, not everybody could be the best. And trying to like mechanically force everybody to be the same, I think is kind of a losing proposition. That's sick. I love it. That's exactly the type of thing that I would want to talk about. Let's see. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I want to play just a Ameritrash game too. I don't know about Talisman because that game is pretty rough, but yes. I had a player in my Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign that wanted to use Gouging Claw to get bonuses to climb. I told them no, but that if they used a spell that gave a climbing bonus, they could flavor it as Gouging Claw. And Kendall, I think what you are describing is totally valid, but I am going to say that that is exactly the type of thing that my players would riot about and be very, very unhappy about that. Because for them, it's not just about the flavor. They want the simulationism and the game mechanic to operate as one. And so I think if a player was like, oh wait, they had to climb this really thing, and he's like, hey, I have Gouging Claw. That's going to give me these huge claws. Can I use that to give myself a bonus? And I think their expectation, and maybe even mine, would be yes. You are playing it correctly, Kendall. That is the Pathfinder 2 would tell you that you are playing it correctly. I am simply saying that, and part of my problem with Pathfinder 2 is that it is designed, fairly robustly and fairly well. And as a result, as a GM, my natural inclination is to go, oh, absolutely, you can use Gouging Claw to do that. But I also understand that at a certain point, you're starting to destroy the game, and the quality or the value of the game is important, I think, in Pathfinder 2. And so that's why I kind of get into this weird headspace. Would I place Twilight Imperium into Euro or American type? It's kind of a weird amalgamation. I would place it into the way too fucking long type, but I would probably say it's more American style. Oh, that is also 100% true, KC. And we've often said this on the Patreon, where we say, everyone's like, oh, I love playing combat as war. I love it. Like when we get barrels of oil and we throw them down on the enemy while they're down in a ravine, and then we blow them up and they never even got a chance to roll the dice rolls. They were just dead without any dice rolls because we were so clever. And then like 2 sessions later, you do that to the PCs. The NPCs are like, oh, we'll lure you into a trap. This room is filled with flaming oil. We light it on fire and you're all dead. Suddenly everybody's like, oh, this is bullshit. What the fuck? Yep. People are illogical. People do act, they want, rules for thee, not for me, right? That is what players want. They're the heroes. They get to do this shit. Emi, I have started to slowly turn away from games where the players have no way to influence the results after the roll. That is very true for me as well. I love randomness, right? Before determining the outcome. So input randomness instead of output randomness. I'd much rather sort of be in a situation where we still have randomness, but I get to make decisions and choices after that randomness to try to, okay, it's going to be bad, but you get to pick, is it bad here or is it bad there? Oh, you did really well. You get 2 things out of this choice of 3. And you're like, oh, cool, I get to make a decision. Because then it feels more like we're actually playing a game where we have input rather than just playing basically craps, where we're just rolling the dice and seeing what happens. And we have no influence on it after the so-and-so, after the dice roll. The overall idea of not being able to influence your roll through resources. I'm not sure what you mean there. What we're finding in 4E, there's only one way to play it. It's very much a board game mentality. Greece does this one thing specifically. Yes. And that was a problem that we ran into a lot in 4th edition, to be honest with you. It is. Now, there is a solution to this, which is a robust ritual system that operates differently than it actually does in 4th edition. But yes, Dr. Waits, that is a problem that we ran into frequently. Derek, it actually amazes me on how much on the same page OSR and PBTA game. I mean, Derek, I've said this on stream many times. OSR games and PBTA games are both fiction first. Very much fiction first. And you're absolutely right. OSR does not have any sort of genre emulation. It does not have any sort of narrow mechanical influence. It's usually almost entirely pure simulationism, but both are fiction first. And they're actually much closer than I think people understand, because people think PBTA game and they think fate points and they think like narrative, make it up, whatever, have fun. But it is not the case, right? I would say, believe it or not, I would say Powered by the Apocalypse style games, PBTA games, are closer to OSR games than PBTA games are to Fate. I think Fate is like up here, and I think PBTA and OSR are down here. I mean, they're definitely distinct. There's some difference there with the simulationism, but they're both fiction first in that way. Listen, I can't abide by stupidity though, right? There's my bias. That's my bias coming through. Running up swords is stupid, so you get punished. Wait, does Derek's group want RuneQuest? Absolutely not. Hides his eyes. Agree there. PF2, I feel like we're doing something wrong if we do gouging claw for climbing. For one thing, my character is specialized in climbing, and that would step on my toes. And that you are exactly going down the rabbit hole that I go down. And I know what a lot of people say. A lot of people say, it doesn't matter. You could just make up whatever rule you want. I know that. But I also know that this game is designed and that these character choices are designed, and you're making a lot of these character choices with a lot of different feats and a lot of different skills and a lot of different class feats, ancestry feats, general feats, skill feats, and these items. And, you know, and you're doing that because you feel like that is going to give you this bonus. And when somebody just goes, well, I just do this thing instead and I get the same bonus that you got by taking one of your limited character resources and investing it into that thing, it can create feel bad moments. And even I, as the game master, I'm like, I don't want to make it, you know, if we're going to go through all this fucking work of choosing all these stupid feats, the last thing I want to do is basically ignore them and say, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I don't care what feats you have. You can do the thing. Even though that is my natural instinct to do. Omanal says, funny thing is everything Derek is saying has been my default for 40 years with my players in GM style. We know nothing is perfect, but we want rules light enough to make a decision. Yeah. But I don't want it to be so rules light that it feels like there's no game there, that it feels like we're just throwing poop at a wall, you know? And I don't want that. And I think a lot of these OSR games are a little too rules light for me. How do you feel about using ChatGPT as an assistant when playing? Have you tried that? Totally against it. I think ChatGPT is great. I think it's a very awesome, useful tool. I have not tried using it while playing, but because I don't usually have a computer with me. So that wouldn't be an option for me, but I mean, I think it'd be fine. Definitely, you know, for like coming up with ideas between game sessions. I mean, I've definitely gone to PBT. I've definitely gone to Chat GPT and say, hey, give me a list of 20 Elvish names, and then I can take that and write that down onto like my GM screen or whatever. For sure. Vince Baker, according to Matt, Vince Baker has said OSR is really close to PBTA. Well, there you go. And the master himself. And I think it makes a lot of sense because, again, I think a lot of people have a wrong idea about PBTA. In fact, Forged in the Dark, even though people say, John Harper said it is a PBTA game because that is the definition. If someone says it's a PBTA game, it is. But I think Forged in the Dark is actually significantly separate from PBTA. I think if Fate is here and PBTA is here, I think Blades in the Dark is in between. And that's because Blades in the Dark has a resource mechanic. It is a narrative meta currency. It's called stress. And, PBTA games don't have it. Now, that being said, I like that meta currency. And I do appreciate what it does, but it does get you away from fiction first because it starts asking, what is this stress mechanic? And there are certain Magpie games which have introduced these kind of resource mechanics in the form of fatigue, exhaustion, or whatever, that also sort of tick PBTA up a little bit further away from its OSR roots. Cal, the whole step on the toes issue with PF2 is why I started making my own game in the first place. And that's a very valid reason. PF2 is just too balanced and too contained for my liking. And you know what? I completely agree with you. I think the game is, in a weird way, it is designed too well. And I respect it too much to just go fucking trampling through its garden. I don't want to step on anything, and I don't want to shit on the hard work and the choices the players made and all this other stuff. And that's a problem we had with Northern Reaches. We came up with all these really cool ideas and fun ideas and powerful ideas. And a lot of times it just ruined the fucking game because the game is so designed so tightly, so well, Would you let a fighter or rogue who is spec'd in climbing be better at grappling because they have a good grip on things and have insane grip strength? Absolutely, I would allow that. Because that's the other side, the non-magical side. Letting mundane characters use their skills and abilities the rules don't intend. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like, for example, I'll give you a great example. There's a monster. And this is how my brain works, okay? Would I allow a rogue who is spec'd in climbing to use the climbing to grapple a medium-sized creature? Let's assume that the rogue is a medium-sized creature. No, I wouldn't allow that. But let's say there was a huge creature, okay, or a gargantuan creature. And maybe even in the rules of the game, the grappling doesn't work against that creature unless you're also that size, okay? And a rogue goes, hey, can I climb up this guy and kind of tie him up, grapple him up from the top? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And you should totally make a climbing check. And it should totally be a grappling check because you're grappling him. You're climbing up him and grabbing, tying a rope around his wrist. And you're actually climbing it up his back to swing it down the other side to kind of put him in an arm bar. 100% make a climbing check. I wouldn't let you make a climbing check if the guy was just medium sized because you're not climbing him. But now you totally are climbing this guy. And maybe there's some other danger. And if you fail the check, he's going to grab you and hurl you across. But now we're getting to why I like Powered by the Apocalypse. Because it's very easy to see how that would work in a Powered by the Apocalypse mechanic. The player says, blah, 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 bullshit. And I go, totally, make your roll. And the player rolls a 6-. And I go, yeah, you start climbing up the guy. You try to work your rope around his wrist. And then, his other hand comes around, grabs you off of his back. He throws you across the floor. You go scattering across, smash into some tables and break against the wall. Take some conditions. Or if you're playing Dungeon World, take some hit point damage, which I don't like. But and I am following the rules there. The rules of Dungeon World or the rules of PBTA say on a 6-, the GM can make as hard of a move as I like. And everybody knows that. So the framework is there. I'm just taking it and taking the fiction and taking what feels right for this situation and creating a moment that is very easy to sort of live in everyone's brain because that feels right. On the same time, if the player rolls high enough, I'd be like, oh yeah, the guy fictionally, he's grappled. If there's a mechanical effect to that, he's that, he's now bound up and you climbed up him and it was cool. So I like that PBTA gives me that framework for taking fiction and what's happening. And then the players want to do something in the fiction. And then we translate what the players just said into a mechanical framework. And then that mechanical framework gives us enough output variance that it's exciting, it's fun, it's random, but also it allows us to sort of keep the game going regardless of whether they succeed or fail or partially succeed in the case of PBTA. Does that mean DC 21 will be a PBTA game? I don't know. Probably not. There's so many PBTA games. Nober, there are ways to balance PV2, like if you're climbing in combat, the climbing guy spends 1 action to climb and the gouging guy climbs 2. It's an insane amount of effort to learn that, though. It is, but also, Nober, it's also a way of saying, I am going to punish you for trying to use your spells in a creative way, right? A lot of times when Pathfinder 2 people bring this up, they say, you could either make it cost more actions, or you say, you can make the DC higher. And both of those are disincentives. You are disincentivizing those actions because you're providing them with a penalty or you're providing them with a drawback. And that isn't the type of thing that, as a GM, for me personally, I don't want to disincentivize that. In fact, I want to incentivize that kind of behavior, hit points are totally a meta currency. I agree. The problem, actually, that I have with hit points is I don't think that they're treated as a meta currency enough, right? Smith had a campaign where you could cash in hit points to get re-rolls or something like that in combat or something. Like hit points were like an actual meta currency. I actually think that we should lean more into that, but people don't want to do that. The balance of, according to London, the balance of PF2 makes it a good canvas for unbridled FBT. That's fluffy bullshit time for those of you who aren't members of the Night's Last Call. You can fight and win and write your secret microfiction. Well said. Too well sounds like a way to say inflexible. Yeah, a little bit. Dark Souls 5e replaced hit points with position, and you could spend it for plus to hit or plus damage. Spend hit points to recover spell slots. Yeah, I mean, that, in 4th edition, Smith did this through healing surges, right? Which is sort of a form of, long-term bank of hit points, right? You have like your active hit points, and then you can convert healing surges into hit points. But Smith allowed characters to get back their powers by spending healing surges. Oh man, that is also a good point. We don't want the rules light games. We want rules light games. That's too difficult to try to remember everything. Anyways, well, we're getting close to 2 o'clock, so I was only going to go for like 90 minutes, so we ended up going a little bit longer. But again, this is why it's difficult. This is why I have so much to talk about, because like I think I overthink these games, they're important to me. So I if something's important, you make the time. I make the time, and I want, every RPG experience to be as good as I can make it, and sometimes that means I have to really think about this stuff and really think about my group and my players. And, but I will say, I am really looking forward to kicking off these Patreon games. So many members of my community are running and playing games multiple times a month in our Discord. And I'm a little jealous, they have all this extra gaming and fun times, and I'm not getting that because I'm busy. I got to stream, and I got to pack away merch and design these, mega game mechanics. But now that we've sort of made the priority, made the time, and especially with the studio being closed down, I have the time to get to play games with folks. And a lot of these people I'm actually going to be playing with, I've actually played with before in person at various conventions. If you ever see me at a convention, feel free to stop by and say hi. But it'll be fun because it'll be interesting to get a chance to play these games, to play a wider, like what Boothby was saying way at the beginning of the stream, where he's playing like 3 or 4 different, kind of wildly different types of games. And I think for someone like me who has a lot of itches to scratch, that might be a really good solution. That is, and again, it's just not practical with the way that my real life works with my real life in-person group, who, we're lucky if we can get together twice a month. The last thing that we want to do is run 3 different games. That's just never going to work out, So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you'll hear all about it, especially if you're a member of the Patreon. If you aren't, check us out, patreon.com/nightslastcall. We have people on there pretty much all throughout the hours of the day. We have a good chunk of EU people. We got a good chunk of people in Australia, New Zealand, and and then of course, obviously here in America. But we like to spend our time doing the same stuff, talking about games and playing games, and it's really fun. So, oh, hey, Hides His Eyes. Thank you for the £5. Thanks for the fun stream, and from a fellow TTRPG overthinker. And thanks, chat, for the interesting chat. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's what we're here for, right? It's a community. It's a conversation. It's not just me lecturing you. It's us hanging out. That being said, Boothby, we may take a look at DC-20. I mean, it did do $2.5 million or something like that, and I'm sure the people would want to take a look. You can't tell me that you're not interested a little bit. You can't tell me you're not interested. But thank you again, Hides His Eyes. Real quick, let me give a shout out. Thanks to Hides His Eyes, Jerry Webster, London Moonlight, and C. Cal for the super chats today. Thank you so much. We didn't even have a tip goal, but appreciate it. And thank you to anybody who might have been able to join us for the first time live, because we're over here at EU friendly time zone. And again, I'd like to try to get at least one, maybe 2 of these in a month, just to kind of make it, a little bit nicer and a little bit easier for you all. All right. Well, I'm going to get going. There's probably a hot dog or a hamburger for me to eat over here, and I'm going to let you all get to bed if you're over there in Europe. But again, looking forward to continue to hang out with you all. We have some streams that we're going to stream, and some other stuff. But looking forward to it. And we'll see you next time on Nights of Last Call. Peace, everybody.